I'm Fauzi, alcoholic. So good morning everyone. Like I said, I am terrified, absolutely terrified. So let me just get vulnerable and say that, and hopefully it'll take the power away. I have literally no idea what's going to come out of my mouth. It might be all over the place, but I trust there will be something in it for someone sitting here. This just feels very surreal sitting here. I remember when I entered treatment and I used to come to these meetings and I used to sit and listen to these people that share these significant milestones, and I just never thought it would be possible for me. It just kind of seemed so unattainable for somebody like me at the time. Like there was so much insanity still, and I just never thought, I could be one day where I could say like I'm a year clean, and I can kind of say that now, which really is a miracle for somebody like me. Okay, let me just take a moment to breathe. So last night I decided I'm going to start reading my step workbooks because I somehow felt like that I'd forgotten. I wouldn't know what to say. I don't have anything to say, so what am I going to say? And I cringed when I read my step one. I absolutely cringed, and then I stopped, and then I'm like, I don't need to read all of this. I remember now. I know what's going to happen. I know what happened. So my sponsor just said, like everybody gets told, is just talk about how it was, what happened, and how it is like now. So I'll just start there. I'm from Bloemfontein, and I was born into a stable family at the time with two parents. I have two older siblings. I'm the youngest. And my early childhood was really good. My parents were middle class, so we didn't need anything. We got everything that we wanted. My parents were always big on education, and I never needed anything. I was really given everything that we needed. But I always remember, like from a young age, since I attended school, I always felt like I wasn't good enough, as I started wearing like these big glasses when I was 7, and I was like skinny and scrawny, and I was just so nerdy, and I just never felt good enough. I never felt beautiful enough. I never felt smart enough. And I remember like from an early age when somebody would give me a compliment, I couldn't take it. Like it made me cringe. I was like, why are you complimenting me? Like I don't deserve that, And so life went on and stuff like that. It was pretty normal. And then when I was about 6, I had an experience at school where an older guy at school kind of sexually violated me. And I remember that was probably one of the earliest memories where I would just kind of act like it didn't happen. So I just disconnected myself from it and be like, it didn't happen to me, it happened to somebody else. And I never told anybody until like more than 20 years later, when I finally told my sister and obviously my sponsor. But I kind of just disconnected from that, and I always just disconnected throughout my childhood from anything that felt uncomfortable or didn't feel right. I would just kind of act like it didn't happen and concentrate on something else, Just kind of never faced anything that was uncomfortable. And like I said, family life was normal up until a certain stage. When I reached a certain age, when I started noticing kind of cracks in our family life. Like I noticed that my mom was a bit different. There were times where when we were younger, when she would maybe go to hospital, and we would just be told by my dad and my grandmother and them that she's a bit sick, she's just going to go home for a week or two. And we would, that was just normal. And later on, obviously, just to fast track it, my mom was probably one of us. Never really acknowledged it while she was in it, but I can kind of now look back and say she was definitely one of us. And so there was just a lot of things that happened with her. She was never really okay. I would always notice her maybe being a bit more happier sometimes when she was drunk or sometimes on medication, but she was never really okay. And when I was around 15, she took her own life and stuff as a result of the disease, and I found her, And I also, that was also a significant thing in my life, because again, for a couple of years after that, I just acted like everything was okay. I acted like, oh gosh, it happens, I just kind of didn't acknowledge, like I knew she wasn't there anymore, but I kind of didn't deal with any of the emotions that came with it. I just batted away and I just carried on, threw myself in schoolwork, just kind of did everything around the house, that I was supposed to do, that's expected of, I guess, a girl in the house, traditionally, whatever, sometimes. So I kind of just carried on doing that. Up until, a certain age, and just to backtrack, really, up until my school career was normal. I was always like the child that did what was expected of them. I did well in school academically, and but those feelings of inadequacy really just always followed me. I always tried to be a part of the group, but in every group I wasn't smart enough, I wasn't beautiful enough, I wasn't cool enough, I was too nerdy. The word was just always I was not enough. I was just not enough. Being me was just not enough for me. But anyway, so I went on, and what I also started finding is that I got affirmation. From an early age, like everybody would say, oh gosh, you're such a strong girl, what happened to your mom, and you just carrying on and you're doing well in school. And I started being like, oh, okay, like doing what's expected of you and doing the right thing gets you affirmation. So, I actually just proceeded with all of that. And so I would kind of just always do what my dad wanted me to do. I would do what my parents, what my teachers wanted me to do. I just kind of always followed the textbook thing of how to be the perfect child, because that gave me affirmation. And so I just basically carried on that way throughout my schooling career. What I also noticed with my mom's death is I reacted differently than what my siblings reacted. I couldn't move on from it. I would always talk about it, even 10 years after it all had happened. I would always talk about it, and I started getting a lot of self-pity around it, But I really kind of carried on that way. I didn't react the same way that the rest of my family did. They kind of had their mourning, they mourned about it, and then they had their moments, but then they kind of got on with life. But I never did. It was always at the back of my mind. I always replayed it in my mind. And I kind of did that up until I went into treatment. Then I think when my alcoholism really showed in terms of substance, my behavior was always questionable. Like, I remember when I would break something in the house. I remember this one time I broke a shower door. And I didn't want to tell my dad I broke it. So I called a handyman at 11. My uncle was a handyman, and I called him and I'm like, please come and fix the shower door, before my dad and them saw it. So already there, I saw my willfulness and trying to control situations so that I don't get into trouble. So I would always kind of do stuff like that. After school, I went to varsity, and again, my varsity career wasn't really that eventful. I kind of just studied, did what was expected of me, graduated around 22, and then I started working at the military. And that was really the year, I think, when I was 22, when my addiction really started in its full swing. Because now suddenly I had money. I was 22. I was in the military. I got an officer's rank, and suddenly again it was all this affirmation. You're so young. You're doing so well. And suddenly I guess all those feelings of inadequacy were like gone to a certain extent, because I was like, wow, look at my life, I've accomplished something. But I always remember, with all of that, I always never felt good enough. A simple thing like when in the military, when somebody would salute you, I felt like I wasn't worthy of being saluted. Like, I just never felt like I deserved that position and I deserved to be there. I just never, ever felt good enough. But anyway, so I went on and I started drinking. My first year of actually working in adulthood, I started drinking. And I also found my another drug of choice of mine, which was a relationship. So that same year, I started using. And also, just to say, sorry, I was put on prescription medication when I was around 19. And so I was kind of like on medication on and off to kind of deal with the stuff with my mom, because I said I was depressed, and all of that. So the doctor was like, okay, you should just put on medication. So I got put on medication when I was around 19, and I kind of was on it on and off, for up until I entered treatment. But as my first year of working, I started drinking. So I found my drug of choice, which was drinking, and then I also started using self-medicating more and using the prescription medication more. And then I also found, this relationship, which was such a significant thing in my life, because that guy literally became my God. If things were not okay in the relationship, I wasn't okay. Suddenly, my work didn't seem so exciting anymore. My family wasn't that important anymore. I was consumed with being with this person all the time. When I got home from work, I had to be with him, and then we would kind of be with each other every day. And interestingly enough, he was also an addict. So, I was kind of attracted to the chaos and, kind of like, this rock and roll lifestyle of, I'm dating an addict, and the world is against us, because everybody in my family could see that this person was not right for me and that I wasn't okay. But I kind of felt like it was me against the world. None of us, me and him against the world. Nobody wants us to be happy. And I kind of didn't listen, And it was, as you can imagine, with any two alcoholics being together, it was absolute disaster, There's a lot of war stories that went with it, how the state of the relationship was. It was abusive, mentally and emotionally, vice versa, But I always just remember blaming everything on him, saying he's the addict, because obviously I was not the addict. He's the addict, and he's the problem, and he's causing all this chaos in my life. And then I also started going to psychiatrists because I was depressed, and I would tell the psychiatrist all these sad stories about, my mom, this happened to my mom. And, I'm a victim, all of this, I'm a victim in life, You would also want to use medication and drink if this traumatic thing happened to you, But it was always just everything that I blamed on everybody else. And the relationship with my dad was also significant because it taught me a lot about the expectations that I had around people. I would always say my dad wasn't emotional enough. He didn't hug me enough. He didn't love me enough. He was not that dad in the movies, that is like, kind of does that soppy stuff that, I don't know, that dad and daughters do. I always wanted, us to have that relationship, but I always expected my dad to be different than what it was. I expected my mom to not be sick. I expected her to be different. I expected my sister to be the typical traditional big sister, and although she was, I wanted it to be my way, I always expected everything else that wasn't my reality, and that's kind of what I did throughout with my family. It was just never good enough. They were not good enough for me. They should be different. They should act differently. They should love me differently, and that's how I went throughout my life. And then I would get resentful if they didn't live up to my expectations that I created. And this is all stuff that I did as a child even. I started doing that, Sorry if I'm jumping around. I hope you can follow. So anyway, just going back to my relationship and just me drinking and using, I started drinking a lot. For the next couple of years, it just kind of progressed. I drank a lot. This guy was my God. When we broke up, I felt crippled. At times when we have these breakups, I would feel crippled. I would feel like I can't work, I can't eat. So I would kind of just drink whenever we had a fight. I would just kind of drink and use pills not to deal with it because it's uncomfortable. And then the moment he comes back to me and we're good again, then I'm good. Then I can carry on with life, But that I can see now that relationship was just as good as picking up or using. It crippled me. And so that the relationship went on for 4 years. And between, basically for my whole working career, really, for these last 7 years, up until I entered treatment, there have been a lot of consequences. A lot of car accidents. I would get very rageful because I also realized I was a very angry and resentful person. So when my addiction progressed, I would go into these fits of rages where I would tell my dad, maybe you should have done more for my mom, then this would have happened. I would kind of, get angry over everything that happened in my childhood when I was drinking, and I would just be like a bull in a china shop, just kind of telling everybody what I think of them, how crappy I think they am, how I think they should do, how they should change their lives so that my life can be better. But I was concentrating on so much on what needs to be changed in others that I would never really looked at what needs to be changed in me. But I really blamed every single person. I blamed my boss, I blamed my managers, I blamed my colleagues. I blamed every single person in my life for the way that my life was going. I wasn't the problem because I was hard down by life. And that was kind of just, poor me. Please give me a break. You would also use if you were me. And I just kind of did that, manipulated everybody in my life, and every time when somebody would confront me on my addiction and my alcoholism, I would kind of just say, sorry, I had a hard life. You would understand. If you went through it, you wouldn't be able to make it. At least I'm still working and I'm still achieving something in life, so I'm doing something right. And for a couple of years, I was able to maintain a good job, maintain the image of being good enough. But obviously, I in the last 2 years of my addiction, I progressed to such a state that I could not maintain anything. I couldn't maintain relationships. I couldn't maintain jobs. Any good opportunity that came in my life, I would mess it up in some way or another. And yeah, a significant thing that I also did, there's a lot of war stories that everybody can relate to what we do in addiction. But the one thing that was a big thing for me is this one time I had taken a lot of medication, and I went into psychosis, and I went up into the top of the house at my dad's house. I climbed on the top of the roof, a double-story thingy, and I jumped off the roof in an attempt to commit suicide, while my grandmother, my dad, and everybody else is standing at the bottom shouting at me not to jump. And it shows how selfish I was, that everybody in our family was still so grief-stricken over the stuff, over my mom and her dying because of suicide, and there I go do it to them again, And even after that, for a good 3 years after that, I didn't stop. It got worse. I remember when my dad and them picked me up from the hospital after the accident, I told them, why did you save me? I wanted to die, so don't lecture me on it because I didn't tell you to save me. As if I was expecting them to kind of leave me to die there on the driveway. That was the insanity. I thought I resented them for saving me and just kind of letting me. I wanted to die. And I was just a nightmare after that. Like I said, I went into rages, and my dad would have to call the police on me. I had run-ins with the law. This significant relationship, I broke up with this guy of 4 years. He broke up with me, and I basically felt like I was going through withdrawals. I couldn't do anything. I was obsessive. I would call him all the time, and I just couldn't let go of this relationship. Even though it was so toxic, I still wanted it, And the relationship ended, and my life was just chaos until then. I'd lost a job, and I was basically, I'd resigned from the military by then, and I'd started with another company, but I couldn't manage this new job. And then I basically just was sitting at home for 2 years because it was after the suicide attempt, and I'd messed up my knee and stuff like that, so I wasn't working for a while, and then I couldn't find a job. And basically in those 2 years, it was a nightmare. And then what I also found is after that, I kind of started, after the drugs and alcohol wasn't enough, I started using relationships with men to kind of feel powerful, because I liked the affirmations that relationships gave me. They made me feel good about myself. And I would always go to a guy when everything was falling apart in my life, because when I was like, there's that one person that likes me, that gives me affirmation, so I can't be that bad, And I would kind of go on to be in relationships, and at some point, just be in random relationships, drugs and alcohol, drugs and pills, and alcohol and pills, and that was basically my life. That's what I did for a good couple of years. And then in 2017 is when my disease had progressed to another level that I didn't even recognize myself. I'd started with a new company, and again, got all the affirmation, got a good job. It was earning a lot of money, and I moved into my own place. I moved out of the house. I got my own place, and suddenly I had 2 cars, and I was just living the life, and nobody could tell me anything. When my dad confronted me on my addiction and all of the stuff that I was doing, because I would obviously, when I was still staying at home, I would secretly drink the week. So obviously it started with just drinking weekends, then it started drinking during the week, and then it got to a point where there were bottles in my cupboards everywhere. I would stuff bottles everywhere. There would be pill, these wrapper thingies everywhere, and I was hiding them. So I started drinking in the evenings as well. When I got home from work, I would drink and I would stuff the bottles by my shoes and in my clothes. It was just everywhere. And obviously my dad started seeing these things and he confronted me on it, and I was just like, you know what, I don't need this. I'll just get my own place. And as painful as it was to kind of move out and get my own place, it was the best thing I could have done, because it brought me to my knees. Because suddenly there was nobody around me anymore that could tell me what to do, because I would be like, I stay on my own, I don't need your help, I don't need financial assistance from anybody, so I can basically do what I want to do. And nobody's going to tell me anything because you don't own me and I'm an adult. So I stayed on my own. Work in the beginning did really well. Like, I did well in my job, but suddenly the cracks started to show. I started lying about where I was. I started getting into numerous accidents with the company car, and then I would not report it. I would fix it myself until they didn't find out. But every month, it wasn't weird for me to say, oh, I bumped the car again. Or there was always something happening, My brother would always ask, what is it this time? There was always something. And I started hanging out with dodgy people. I started hanging out in clubs that I wouldn't usually go to. In some moments, I would wake up at 4 a.m. in the morning and drive to random shebeens or pubs or anything just to get alcohol. But I was always drunk. I was always under the influence. And it got to a point where I was working and I would be popping pills while I'm driving on a 6-hour trip. It got to a point where I was high all the time. And I was a medical rep, so I would kind of sit with doctors, and then I started manipulating them to give me prescriptions for free. And that's what I did. And I would kind of spin a story, I work long hours, and I can't sleep at night, so please give me something. And I had different prescriptions at every doctor. I had a lot of doctors, but I planned it in such a way that it wasn't in close vicinity with each other. And then I would not do it on medical aid so they couldn't trace it. I would go to different bottle stores, and then so that they don't remember me. And I would kind of be so insane about it. Like, if I knew that I was a local if I was a regular at a Pacific bottle store, I would always go to them and be like, I'm having a party, so what wines do you think I should get? When I all knew I was just going to go drink it alone in my flat. But I didn't want them to think that, I'm drinking so much. So I would kind of just lie and all of that. And I kind of did that, where I was to the point, obviously, where I was drinking and using every day. And I'd gotten into so much trouble at work. I had to get a hearing because of these dishonesties around these car accidents that I was hiding. And the last straw came when I was about almost a year and a half with this company, and I had an accident with the company car, and then I hid it and I fixed the car on my own. But then the insurance company from the other car that I had an accident with contacted my company, and they said, there was an accident on this specific date, and this is the damage, and it came out. And in an attempt to control the situation, I resigned before they fired me. Because, I'm not going to be fired. I'll just resign and control the situation. And that's what I did. And and then I resigned from that job. And then suddenly, everything that made me feel good, my job, money, relationships, all the materialism that I got from this job was gone. And I had nothing left, because those things fixed me. If I had money, if I had a car, if I had a relationship, I was okay. Because successful people have those things. So I can't really be an addict and be so unmanageable if I have all these things. And I guess, my higher power really had to take those things away from me to kind of realize, that is what happened. And so what also happened throughout that year is this one time I was visiting my brother, and I had gone into psychosis, and he stays in this mining town, and I kind of walked around aimlessly and with random people, and I embarrassed him in front of his work colleagues. And he actually said to me, "You need to get help. I think you have a problem." And that's when I started going into the rooms. I was probably in the rooms for about 5 months and stuff, but I judged the people in there. I thought they looked like street addicts. I didn't want to be with them. If this is what recovery looks like, then I don't want to be there. And I sat there, off my face, looking like shit, really. But I was sitting there judging them and saying, they don't look good. I think this is not for me. I think I don't have that. But I don't know, something happened in the meetings for me. I also just went also to prove to my dad and to my brother, just to take the heat of me that I'm doing something. And I remember I bought the big book once, and I put the big book on the dining room table. And I opened it up like I was reading, just so that my dad sees, she's doing something. But I never read the book. But I put it there so that it looks like, I'm doing something. So I really went to the rooms for the wrong reasons, and I guess I ended up staying for the right ones. And there was things in the rooms that I started being attracted to, like these people in the rooms would kind of talk about where they were at, what they were doing, and I was like, okay, you might be onto something, because at that point I tried religion, I tried these psychedelic drugs that you go into treatment centers for. I tried, controlling what I drink, leaving the alcohol and just using the medication in a controlled manner, but it was never controlled. But, I tried a lot of things. Just like a funny story, I remember this one time I went to this lady who said that God will help me, but I need to pray between certain times, like between 5 and 7, because those are the times where God is available. So I would, go and pray between 5 and 7, because that's the time when God would kind of hear me. But I really did like ridiculous things to get better. I would try to get into relationships. I would try to, just do random things just to get better. But the point is, I never wanted to try anything that caused me to look at myself and to face myself. But while in the rooms, I still kind of drank. After each meeting, I still stopped at the bottle store. I still popped pills. I did all of that still. But I still kept on going back, because the more I went, the more I heard something that was, that resounded with me. Like I kept on going back. But then the only reason why I really decided to get into treatment was just because of pain. And I don't always want to talk about it, but I always say, the more you talk about things and the more you expose your guilt and your shame, the more it loses its power over you. And so that's what I always try to do. And when I was about the same month that I resigned from my last job, this was December 2018, I was in a random relationship with another guy, and I felt pregnant, and I was just like, what the hell? Who is this person? Yeah, I was pregnant, jobless, didn't really know much about this guy. And really because I was promiscuous in what I was doing. I was just kind of using relationships to fill me up, and here I was, and I was like, shit, who am I? I didn't know who I was. At this point, nobody really wanted to be friends with me. My family didn't want anything to do with me. I just lost my job. I didn't even tell my family I lost my job. And what my plans were is that I'm basically going to kill myself. I'm going to wait for Christmas, and then in January, I'm going to tell everybody I'm going to go on holiday, and then I'm just going to kill myself in my flat. And I was serious, and that was my plan. And my sponsor at the time, she was my sponsor, but I didn't treat her as my sponsor. After a couple of months, she said, listen, I can't sponsor you anymore because you're not serious, you don't know what you're doing. You don't really want recovery, so I can't carry on trying with you if you don't want it yourself. And she dropped me, and she said, maybe you need to look into going into rehab. And I don't know what that was, but in that moment, I was like, okay, I'll listen. And I was sitting in the McDonald's parking lot, and I was with a girl from the fellowship next to me, and then she said, I heard about this place. In KZN, let's just Google it, and let's see if we can help you. And I called Cedars the treatment center that day in the parking lot in McDonald's, and I called them, and one of the I think it was Caleb that answered, and I just remember telling him, like, I was a mad person. I was telling him my whole life story, and I was just kind of telling him, like, I'm in a mess, like, I don't know what to do. I don't remember exactly what I said, and I remember I called back, I called 3 times in succession. Are you sure I can come? Are you sure? When can I come? And I just remember being met with such understanding, no judgment, and whatever I told them, they didn't kind of fall off their seats and were shocked by it. They just said, oh, okay, you can come. And within 2 days, I was at the treatment center. And if I think of that moment, I take it back to a couple of weeks prior to that moment in McDonald's, where I was on my knees in my lounge, literally crying out to God and being like, God, please help me. I don't understand why I'm this way. I don't understand why I can't stop using. Please just help me. Let me get past this. And that was kind of the first moment where my higher power, where I really humbly asked for help, and my higher power showed up. And I was at this treatment center, and I'd gotten help. And I obviously then told my family I had an abortion. I didn't have the baby, and I came into Cedars the treatment center really broken. I was really broken. I didn't really know how these steps were going to help me, because I thought it was really silly just doing all of these steps and then your life is going to become okay. It seemed silly to me. It seemed too simple for me, because I was such a complicated individual and I had so many problems. I don't think this big book is really going to help me, but I kind of, did the steps. I think I already did my step 1 prior to going into treatment, because I knew my life was unmanageable. And, I went into treatment, and I remember doing my life story feedback, and I was very offended by it, that these people were telling me I make excuses, I am a self-pity victim. I'm like, no, I'm a survivor. I'm not a self-pity victim. But I was just really offended by these things that people were telling me, because I was like, no, that's not me. It's really not me. What I saw as, what people saw as self-pity, I saw as being, I'm strong. I've been through a lot, I saw myself as a go-getter and getting what I want. People saw it as manipulative, which was true, But I always had a better way to describe how I am, to justify how I was. I think my step 4 was my turning point for me, because up until then I was just kind of living in the problem, and then I was able to find a solution. And my step 4 was freeing, but it was difficult as well, because it was the first time in my life that I had to honestly sit and look at myself and be like, this is the reality of who you have become and who you are. I was dishonest, I was manipulative, I was a self-pity victim. I had so many expectations of everybody around me. I had an inability to look at myself. Everybody was the problem in my life. I gave everybody in my life power, because I didn't have any, how can I say, how people treated me and how people were determined how my life was going to be. So if you treated me properly, then my life was going to be proper. So it just means I just gave all my power away to other people to basically do with my life as they please, Didn't take any responsibility at all. And there was a lot of delusion as well, And I blamed my mom's death. I blamed, the incident when I was young. I blamed my dad's lack of being the TV dad. I blamed everybody. And I kind of just felt that if they changed who they were, then my life would be better. But really, when I looked at my step 5, I was the common denominator in all the situations in my life. I was the problem. And I had problems with everybody in my life, even though it was different people, but I had the same problem with all of them, so I was the problem. And what I've kind of learned now is that when I don't accept people and accept my reality and accept things in my life, things will never be okay, because people will never act and treat you the way that you want them to treat you. And if you're going to base your serenity and your state of mind and your peace of mind on how other people treat you, you will never be okay. Yes, unfair things happen in life, and we get hurt, and things happen that maybe shouldn't happen, but do happen. But we have to accept them, because if we don't, we get into a mess, I've learned in recovery now that resentments are very, very dangerous for me. It was my number one offender, really. I can be resentful over things that happened when I was 5, 6, 7, 10. Never making peace with anything. When I used to argue with people, I wouldn't argue about the current situation. I would argue about all the things you've ever done in my life. That's why you're the problem. And I would that's how I would argue. And I really just was so resentful. I was so angry. And I could not let go of things. And I think my step 5 helped me in that way. When I saw my part in every situation, I could understand that my resentment was not valid. And I think I carry that with me now. When I feel hurt by somebody or offended, I need to look at myself, because most times it's my ego that's affected. It's because they are making me feel inadequate, but nobody can make me feel inadequate without my consent. It's because I already feel inadequate, but they didn't make me feel inadequate. Nobody can make me feel anything. Usually when I feel a certain way as a result of somebody doing it to me, I can always link it back to my own things of inadequacy or my ego or how I feel about myself. And then when I always bring situations back to myself, I'm able to solve them. But when I always look at other people and try to control them, there's no solution there, because you can't control other people. What I also had to do in my recovery is I had to go to a halfway house. No, I had to. Not that I had to. It was suggested that I do it. And what I also had to learn, that I don't know what's best for me. I don't know anything about what's good for me, but somebody else knows. And that time when I went on my knees in my lounge in my house and I asked God for help, He sent me help, and now I have to take it, And He sent help through my sponsor and through people in the fellowship. He sent, that girl in the fellowship that was sitting at me in the parking lot in McDonald's. That was His help. He sent Caleb, answering the phone, to tell me it's okay, I can come, He sent my sponsor to help me through my step 11. And there is no coincidences. I think God places everything in your life in such a way that it is to help you, that it is for your greater good. But then that comes with a certain level of surrender. I can't tell God, please help me with this, but then I still try to control the show, because then I'm basically telling God, you don't know what you're doing. I've also learned that I don't really have the right to criticize and look at other people when I don't even know what's good for myself. So many times when I feel that I get judgmental and critical of other people, I have to bring it back to myself, because I will find that the faults that I see in other people are the same faults that I have in myself. So really for me, it's really a daily inventory. My step 11, my step 10 and 11 is such big tools for me, because I drank to get relief from my feelings. I drank because I used, and I drank because I needed to get relief from my anger, from my resentment, from my lack of unforgiveness, for my expectations of other people, for my lack of acceptance. I drank to get relief from those feelings. But somehow this program gives me a solution to deal with resentments and anger and irritations and dishonesties and the manipulations. It helps me to deal with things that I'm in such a state of mind that I don't need relief. So if I can define the program for me, it makes my life so manageable, and it makes my defects so manageable that I don't need relief from them, because the program gives it to me. But it requires action. It requires me to be self-honest. It's my biggest thing. I need to be honest with my sponsor. I need to be honest with the people around me. I need to be honest about my motives. And I need to be willing to put in the action and do the difficult things. When my sponsor suggested go to a halfway house and get a humbling job until the point that you're able to get a job, I thought I can't do that, because I don't want to waitress. I've done that already. I need to get a proper job, because that's what I deserve. I deserve a high-paying job. That is my worth. I need to get that, And if I get that, I'll be okay. And I didn't like that. I didn't like that God wasn't giving me opportunities to go back to work and have the career that I wanted. I was angry at God, and I was like, well, God, I did this recovery thing now. The promises need to come now because I did the work. And I honestly, time set up 20 past. Okay. Oh God. I honestly thought that. I thought I did the work and now the promises needed to come, and I needed to learn a hard lesson again, saying that I'm in recovery, that's again when I need to surrender. Surrender doesn't just happen once for me, I think. It didn't just happen that once in treatment when I conceded to myself that I'm alcoholic, because I believe when I fully concede to my innermost self that I'm alcoholic, that comes with things that I need to do. That I need to follow this program, because if I'm an alcoholic, I know that I don't have acceptance. I know that I'm dishonest. I know I'm manipulative. So therefore, I need to do the work to kind of work on those things. So I need to do the difficult things. I came to the halfway house. I lost my train of thought now. I came to the halfway house and I didn't really want to be here. I felt that I did the work, the promises must come now, and I needed to learn a lesson in God's time is not your time. God knows exactly what you need, and my sponsor will know exactly what I need. So when they tell me you're not ready to go out, or God doesn't give me opportunities necessarily to get another job, I know that that's not my reality and I'm not ready for it. In every single thing that I doubted, what my sponsor said, or I doubted God, in retrospect, I can always look back and be like, yes, I understand why that happened, that way it happened. I understand why I needed to do things like that. Because I believe if I had gotten a job and I'd gotten all of these promises that I want right after I got out of treatment, I wouldn't have been sitting here. Because I was still faulty when I got out of treatment. My defects were still there. I was aware of them, but I was still the same. I had this expectation that I'm going to go into recovery and everything's going to be perfect. After I do the steps, my life is going to fall into place. Relationships are going to be perfect. It's going to be restored. I'm going to get all the promises. I'm going to go back to work and life is going to be sunshine and roses because I have a solution now. And it wasn't the case for me. It was a lot of hard lessons along the way that I had to learn. I had to learn humility again. I had to waitress, really. To learn again how to build a basic relationship, because I learned that I never had the ability to build relationships. I never could. I would always argue with people. I was always in conflict with everybody in my life because I wanted to change the way that they were so that I could be okay. And what I've learned in my first year of recovery is really just to build relationships with people and to be accepting of situations that are not convenient for me. So if I maybe come in contact with a person that maybe doesn't treat me that well, or that is not the person that I expect them to be, I need to learn to accept that person as they are. I've learned to love my dad the way that he is and not wanting to be anything other than what he is. And when I started to do that and accept people around me as they are, I started having proper friendships. I started having meaningful relationships with my family, and I was like, oh my God, this is like magic, I wanted more of it and more of it. And I learned, to be less selfish, that everything doesn't revolve around me. Everybody doesn't walk around talking about what's happening for Fawzi. Did you see what Fawzi was doing today? Did you see what she was wearing? Did you hear what she said today? People don't go to bed thinking about Fawzia. And then when I think about things that way, I realize that it kind of gets lifted for me. That self-obsession gets lifted for me when I think that everything doesn't revolve around me. And I still make a lot of mistakes. I still hurt people. I still offend people. I can still be very condescending to people at times when my arrogance pops up, because that's one of my major defects as well. I still find that about myself, but the beauty of the program as well is that whenever you mess up, you go make amends and you go apologize to that person, and you also do that indirect amends. It doesn't help I keep on saying sorry for the same thing, but my behavior is repetitive. I keep on doing the same things over and over again. So I've also learned that amends is not just saying sorry and I apologize. Amends is also the indirect stuff and changing the way that I do things. So I guess recovery a lot for me has been a change of my behavior. I had to change the way that I think, I had to change the way that I perceive, and I had to learn that I don't know anything really about life. I'm only learning now in this first year. I'm learning about life. I really don't know much. I really don't. I've really messed up every opportunity that was ever given to me. I have hurt my dad. I've been disrespectful. I've done everything disrespectful that you could do to a parent. I've done all of that. I am in no position to judge anybody, and I thank all of this pain. I thank all of these painful things that happened in my life, because if none of them happened, I would have never gotten into recovery. So I had to get pain. I had to get a lot of a pain. I had to get it in quick succession, because that's how I learn. I wish I could say that I could learn through other people's experiences, but most of the times I still learn through pain. My behavior, I will have bad behavior to a point which causes me pain, and then I will change it. And I hope one day I'll be able to learn when somebody says, I think I'm learning that now. When a sponsor says, if you do that, that's going to happen. And then I don't have to go through the pain, And I think that's what a sponsor suggestion also helps a lot, because they're trying to also help you not make mistakes and get in a mess. That's why I listen to suggestion. But sometimes I don't, and sometimes I'm willful and I go do things on my own. But then, I've also learned that I'm free to do whatever I want to do, but I'm not free from the consequences that come from my actions. And that's kind of how it goes. And another miracle for me in recovery is, as I'm waitressing, I work with alcohol all the time, and I'm serving it to people, and I'm clearing it, and I'm around it all the time, and I don't have an obsession around it. And I say that with so much gratitude and so much joy, because I never thought I could be around the drug, the drug that I used, and be okay around it. I never thought that obsession would be lifted around for me, because when I saw alcohol, I had to finish it, and I had to finish everybody's glasses around me. When I would eat somewhere, I would eat around a table and everybody would be drinking wine and they would leave wine or alcohol left. I thought that was mad, because why wouldn't you finish all of this wonderful thing, all of this wonderful, this joy in this glass? Why would you not finish all of this? And I thought that was insane. But now finally I can look at alcohol and be like, it's just a glass of alcohol, it's just a pill, and I don't want to pick it up. But I'm not naive. I know that obsession can quickly come back again. And if I don't carry on staying plugged into my program, working closely with my sponsor, working with my fellows, that obsession will come back, and it will come back as strong as ever. So I'm not going to act like, it's great, I'm never going to want it, because maybe someday, if I'm not spiritually fit and something really bad happens in my life, that alcohol will kind of look very appealing to me. And so I need to stay on top of it, because you know what they say, your addiction is always doing push-ups, waiting for you to mess up. And it's true. And I remember when I came into recovery, people would say all these cliches like, just do as you're told, just follow suggestion, don't, just do everything that you're sponsored. And I thought, it's so cliches, it doesn't work. But I kind of heard I heard a share the other day where this guy said that he didn't come into recovery to be original and to hear original things. So just kind of, to anybody new in recovery, just listen to whatever they tell you, even if it sounds cliched, even if it sounds like it's been said 1,000 times, it works. You want to try something that works, because I've tried everything in my life and none of it has worked besides this program. And it's such freedom for me. A big thing is just to have freedom over my emotions. Before, when I was dissatisfied with something, or I felt offended or attacked by somebody, I would just go in a rage and tell them exactly how I feel now. And now I kind of feel I have choice now. I don't have to react. I don't have to be destructive in my behavior. I don't have to do all of that. I actually have freedom over my emotions, and I have the freedom of choice not to pick up. Before, I really didn't have a choice. I've learned self-forgiveness. I've learned that I have to forgive myself for what I did, because I honestly didn't know any better before knowing the program. I didn't know another way of life. I just did what was natural for me. which was to be faulty and be defective and kind of act on my defects. That was natural to me, and still it's very natural for me to just act on defects and be dishonest and manipulate situations. But what this program also allows me, it allows me awareness, and my step 11s is when I write honestly about what's going on for me, my sponsor can tell me the next day, listen, that's very faulty. That's not okay. Because many times I think I did really well today. My step 11 is proper. I helped others. I wasn't selfish. And then my sponsor will send me a message and be like, really, I don't believe you. And then I was honestly like, and then I'm like, and then I'm so shocked by it. And I'm like, Cass, I don't understand. You know, that was the noble thing to do. But then I really understand again that my motives are still very faulty, and that's why you need another person to point it out to you, because you won't see it yourself. Sometimes you really won't see that you're manipulative and dishonest, and that's why you need your sponsor and your fellows to kind of tell you how it is, you know. And you need to stay plugged in. Sorry, time, okay. You need to stay plugged in. So sorry, I was going to say I wasn't going to share long, and then I ended up sharing long. So it was good. Thank you for letting me share.